Eleanor Vance woke to the steel-gray light of a Chicago autumn morning, the kind that promised biting winds off Lake Michigan. Her small apartment in Lincoln Park, though cozy, offered no escape from the relentless demands of her schedule. The aroma of brewing coffee mingled with the faint scent of old paperbacks that lined her living room walls, her sanctuary after long days. For 10 years, Eleanor had poured her life into Sterling Financial Solutions, a mid-sized investment firm nestled in one of the Loop's gleaming glass towers. She was a senior financial analyst, her days a meticulous dance of spreadsheets, market data, and client reports. She wasn't flashy, didn't chase the limelight, but her work was precise, reliable, and thorough. Colleagues often called her the human database, a nickname she wore with quiet pride. Her routine was a comforting constant. Black coffee, a quick scan of the Wall Street Journal, a brisk walk to the Fullerton L station, then the southbound train into the heart of the financial district. The hum of the train, the rhythmic clack of its wheels, it was all part of the symphony of her professional life. She loved the city's pulse, the ambition thrumming beneath its concrete skin. Eleanor believed in the meritocracy, in hard work paving the way. She'd seen colleagues rise, some less deserving than others, but she'd always trusted in her own diligence. That trust was about to be profoundly shaken. The trouble started subtly, like a hairline crack in a skyscraper's foundation. Marcus Thorne arrived in late spring of 2004, a whirlwind of tailored suits and aggressive ambition, parachuting in as the new vice president of their division. He was charismatic, sharp, and possessed an almost unnerving intensity. A self-proclaimed Scorpio, as he'd once quipped during a team lunch, alluding to his astrological sign, and by extension, a supposed inherent mastery of strategy and power. Eleanor, a Capricorn, found his theatrical self-analysis a touch dramatic, preferring quiet competence to grand pronouncements. Marcus brought with him a new guard, a coterie of younger, hungry analysts he'd mentored at his previous firm, all eager to prove their worth. Eleanor, with her 10 years of institutional knowledge, her quiet efficiency, suddenly found herself an anachronism. The first sign was the reallocation of the Thornton account, a complex but high-profile client Eleanor had managed for 5 years. Marcus called her into his sleek, minimalist office, all glass and brushed steel, a stark contrast to her own cluttered, lived-in cubicle. He leaned back in his ergonomic chair, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing on his lips. "Eleanor, great work on Thornton, really. But I'm looking to give some of our newer talent, say, Brandon, a chance to really shine. Fresh perspective, you know?" He'd offered her a smaller, less strategic account in return, framing it as an opportunity to diversify her portfolio. It felt like a demotion, cloaked in corporate speak. She felt a prickle of unease, but rationalized it. New leadership, new initiatives, it happened. She swallowed her disappointment and adapted. Then came the meeting exclusions. Critical strategy sessions for projects she was deeply involved in would be scheduled, and her name would mysteriously vanish from the invite list. Information she needed to complete her reports would be accidentally withheld, only to be delivered at the last minute, forcing her to scramble. Her once flawless performance reviews began to feature vague criticisms. Needs to be more proactive, struggles with collaborative synergy, lacks innovative vision. Each point was nebulous, unquantifiable, yet chipped away at her professional standing. She'd ask for specifics, for actionable feedback, but Marcus would simply offer an enigmatic smile and say, "It's about perception, Eleanor. We need to elevate our game." The atmosphere in the office shifted. Colleagues who once greeted her warmly now offered curt nods. Her lunch invitations dwindled. The once lively banter around the coffee machine ceased when she approached. She felt like a ghost, a pariah in her own workspace. The quiet firing wasn't a single axe fall, but 1,000 tiny cuts, each designed to drain her professional vitality, to make her question her competence, to push her to the breaking point where she would simply resign. Marcus never raised his voice, never overtly threatened. He orchestrated her isolation with the chilling precision of a surgeon. The final indignity arrived on a Tuesday, late October. Marcus summoned her again, his office even colder, the city skyline outside his window seeming to mock her vulnerability. He slid a document across his polished desk, a performance improvement plan. It was a death warrant disguised as a lifeline. The plan detailed a series of increasingly impossible metrics, aggressive deadlines, and a requirement for weekly accountability meetings with him, all designed to set her up for failure. "Eleanor," he began, his voice devoid of any warmth, "this isn't working out. Your performance has been stagnant. We need to move in a different direction. This PIP is your chance to show us you can keep up. Or, we can discuss a severance package. Voluntarily, of course." The implication was clear: resign quietly or be publicly, humiliatingly fired for failing the impossible PIP. Eleanor felt the blood drain from her face. Her chest tightened and a wave of nausea washed over her. 10 years. 10 years of dedication, loyalty, and impeccable work reduced to stagnant and an offer to exit voluntarily. Humiliation scorched her, a bitter, metallic taste in her mouth. She stared at the document, the carefully worded corporate euphemisms, each one a slap in the face. She wanted to scream, to pound her fist on his pristine desk, to expose the thinly veiled cruelty behind his calm demeanor. But she couldn't, her voice caught in her throat. She simply nodded, numb, and took the document. That night, the anger finally broke through the numbness. She walked home in a daze, the cold wind off the lake biting at her exposed skin, but she felt nothing outside the searing heat of her own fury. She tried to eat, but the food tasted like ash. She tried to distract herself with her beloved books, but the words blurred. She found herself standing at her window, staring out at the illuminated grid of the city, tears streaming down her face. A decade of her life, tossed aside by a man whose only loyalty was to his own ego. The injustice was a physical ache. She collapsed onto her sofa, weeping until she was hoarse, the despair a heavy blanket smothering her. She felt small, insignificant, crushed. The thought of starting over, of facing job interviews while bearing the scarlet letter of a performance-related exit, was almost unbearable. But as the tears finally subsided, something shifted. A spark, small at first, then growing into a steady ember, ignited within her. It wasn't just anger anymore, it was a cold, hard resolve. Eleanor Vance was a Capricorn, after all, grounded, resilient, methodical. She remembered her father's words, a carpenter who'd taught her the value of meticulous planning. Always measure twice, cut once, and keep a record of every single nail you drive. She had always kept records. It was her nature. This was her hidden advantage, her quiet paper trail. Eleanor was a relic of an older corporate era, one where physical files and detailed email threads were paramount. From the moment Marcus Thorne had arrived, she had almost instinctively begun to document. Not out of paranoia, but out of her innate need for precision. Every meeting, every email, every project assignment, every subtle shift in responsibility, it was all meticulously logged. She had a digital archive of her emails, organized into subfolders. She had a physical folder, tucked away in her desk drawer, containing printouts of key communications, old performance reviews, project timelines, and her own handwritten notes, dated and time-stamped, detailing conversations, instructions, and later, the increasingly subtle acts of sabotage. The Thornton account reallocation. She had the original project brief, her 5 years of stellar performance reports, and the email from Marcus informing her of the change, carefully cross-referenced with the new, less significant account he'd assigned her. The meeting exclusions? She had copies of the original meeting invites, then the revised ones where her name was conspicuously absent, along with email threads showing her inquiries about the omissions and the vague, dismissive responses. The stagnant performance criticisms. She had every single positive performance review from her previous 9 years, contrasting sharply with the nebulous criticisms in Marcus's recent assessments. She even had records of her proactive suggestions for process improvements, many of which Marcus had dismissed out of hand, only to reintroduce them later as his own innovative vision. As she sifted through her files, her fingers tracing the words on old printouts, a quiet fury began to solidify into a formidable plan. This wasn't just about her, it was about integrity, about holding power accountable. Marcus Thorne, with his smooth words and manipulative tactics, had underestimated the human database. He had thought he could erase her with a whisper. He hadn't accounted for her quiet, persistent diligence. The next morning, Eleanor didn't go to Sterling Financial. Instead, she called in sick. She spent the entire day meticulously organizing her evidence. She created a binder, thick and heavy, divided into sections: performance history, project reassignments, communication irregularities, meeting exclusions, disparate treatment. Each page was a testament, a time-stamped piece of the puzzle. She included printouts of Sterling Financial's own HR policies regarding fair treatment, performance reviews, and grievance procedures, highlighting the clauses Marcus had clearly violated. It wasn't just a collection of documents, it was a narrative, a forensic account of Marcus Thorne's calculated campaign to oust her. She knew Marcus wouldn't expect this. He expected her to crumble, to slink away with her voluntary resignation. He was banking on her shame, her fear of corporate retaliation. But Eleanor Vance was no longer the timid analyst who had quietly accepted her fate. She was a woman wronged, armed with irrefutable facts. Her target was not Marcus himself, not directly. It was the system he operated within. She knew that simply accusing him would be dismissed as a disgruntled employee's complaint. But a meticulously documented paper trail, presented to the right authority, would be undeniable. Her sights were set on Margaret Chen, the head of HR, a woman known for her strict adherence to corporate ethics, and, more importantly, a direct reporting line to the CEO, Mr. Harrison himself. The following day, Eleanor walked into Sterling Financial not to clean out her desk, but to execute her counter-strategy. She bypassed Marcus's office entirely, her steps firm and resolute as she headed straight for the HR department. She requested an immediate, confidential meeting with Margaret Chen. The HR assistant, flustered by Eleanor's uncharacteristic demand, eventually relented. Margaret Chen, a formidable woman in her late 50s, greeted Eleanor with a polite but cautious expression. Eleanor placed the heavy binder on the polished mahogany table, its thud echoing in the quiet office. "Miss Chen," Eleanor began, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands, "I've been presented with a performance improvement plan by Mr. Thorne. However, I believe it's based on a pattern of discriminatory and retaliatory actions, and I have documented proof." Margaret's eyebrows arched slightly. She picked up the binder, her eyes scanning the cover. "Discriminatory, Miss Vance. That's a serious accusation." "It is," Eleanor affirmed, her gaze unwavering, "and I wouldn't make it without substantial evidence." For the next 2 hours, Eleanor methodically walked Margaret through her quiet paper trail. She explained the context of each document, the timelines, the deliberate withholding of information, the sudden demotions, the shifting goalposts, the vague performance criticisms. She showed how her own positive reviews were suddenly replaced by Marcus's subjective and unquantifiable assessments. She pointed out the company policies that had been violated. She didn't exaggerate, didn't emote. She simply presented the facts, cold and hard. Margaret Chen, initially skeptical, grew increasingly somber as she turned page after page. She recognized the careful organization, the undeniable timestamps, the sheer volume of corroborating evidence. The emails, the project logs, the old reviews, it all painted a picture of a calculated, systematic attempt to force Eleanor out, designed to leave no official trace, no smoking gun, only a broken employee. But Eleanor had the gun, disassembled and laid out for inspection. "Miss Vance," Margaret finally said, closing the binder with a soft thud, her expression now grim, "this is comprehensive. I need to take this to Mr. Harrison immediately. And I need to speak with Mr. Thorne. This requires a full internal investigation." Eleanor felt a surge of triumph, cold and satisfying. "I understand. I have also prepared a separate copy of this for legal counsel, should it become necessary. She hadn't, not yet, but the bluff served its purpose. Margaret Chen's eyes widened almost imperceptibly. The mention of legal counsel, even as a hypothetical, elevated the situation from a mere HR complaint to a potential corporate liability. The consequences unfolded swiftly and decisively. The internal investigation, spearheaded by Margaret Chen with a ferocity Eleanor hadn't anticipated, began the very next day. Marcus Thorne, confident in his untraceable tactics, was caught completely off guard. He tried to deny, to deflect, to spin his narrative, but Eleanor's meticulous documentation rendered his words hollow. His carefully constructed facade of professional competence crumbled under the weight of irrefutable evidence. The fresh perspectives he had brought in, his protégés, were also questioned. Some had benefited from Eleanor's marginalization, others had simply been oblivious. The rumor mill at Sterling Financial went into overdrive. Whispers turned into open discussions. The once feared Marcus Thorne was seen entering and exiting HRS office multiple times, his usual swagger replaced by a tense, drawn look. His meetings were canceled. His projects were temporarily reallocated. The silence around him was no longer a tool of his manipulation, but a sign of his impending downfall. A week later, Eleanor received a call from Margaret Chen. "Miss Vance," her voice was firm, "Mr. Thorne's employment with Sterling Financial Solutions has been terminated, effective immediately, due to a severe breach of company policy and professional conduct. We are also reviewing the roles of others involved." There was a pause. "On behalf of the firm, I want to express our sincerest apologies for what you've endured. We value your contributions, Eleanor, and this kind of behavior is unacceptable. We would like to offer you a new role, effective immediately, as a senior project laid on a new, high-priority initiative, with a significant compensation adjustment. We understand if you need time to consider, or if you wish to explore other options, but we truly hope you will stay." Eleanor hung up the phone, a profound sense of relief washing over her. She stood by her window, looking out at the glittering expanse of the city, no longer seeing a mocking challenge, but a landscape of opportunities. She hadn't sought revenge for personal gain, not initially. She had sought justice, validation, and she had found it. Marcus Thorne, the Scorpio boss, had tried to bury her quietly. But her quiet paper trail, built with years of diligent, unglamorous work, had roared louder than any public accusation, echoing through the glass corridors of Sterling Financial and shattering his carefully constructed world. She didn't take the new job offer immediately. She took a week off, went upstate to a small cabin in the Catskills, and finally allowed herself to truly breathe. The quiet hum of the forest, the rustling leaves, it was a different kind of silence than the one Marcus had tried to impose. It was restorative. She thought about her options, about what she truly wanted. The feeling of vindication was powerful, but she also understood the cost. The fight had been draining, exposing a cynical underbelly of corporate life she had previously managed to ignore. When she returned, she met with Margaret Chen again. She accepted the new role, but with conditions. She pushed for clearer guidelines on performance reviews, for an anonymous reporting system for employee grievances, and for more robust training on workplace ethics. She didn't just want her job back. She wanted to help fix the system that had almost crushed her. She had become a quiet advocate, her experience turning her into a force for change, armed not with aggression, but with an unshakable understanding of the power of documentation. Her revenge wasn't just about Marcus. It was about ensuring that no other Eleanor Vance would have to endure a similar quiet firing. The paper trail had done its job, and now, so would she.